Hi, this is Mitch Jason. I'm here at the beautiful International Chess Park in Santa Monica, California. It's from the club. It's for sale. Take a look at that.
Wow.
Hey, Eddie.
What's up, Mitch? How you doing? What you doing down here with all these pictures?
Look at the Almighty playing Adam.
Mitch. Oh, yeah. Mitch, I haven't seen you in years.
Yeah.
In years. When you guys come so late?
Wait, we're going to do a shoot. We're standing on one of the most beautifully constructed chessboards ever. As you can see, gorgeous. And it's only about 3 miles from the LA Chess Club. So today we're going to be giving you a beautiful chess match between Napoleon Bonaparte and one of his ministers from 1802, Remusat. The game features Napoleon using his knights, just like he did while he was leader of the French army, using his cavalry. Back then, of course, no mechanized infantry. Everything was done with the cavalry. So, this game was played in Paris, 1802. Remusat was one of his ministers. Napoleon is playing the black pieces. Remusat started with pawn to e4. Why is this a great opening move even today in chess? Because it sits on one of the 4 center squares. It controls a center square. It allows the light squared bishop to be developed. It allows the queen to be developed on the light square diagonal. So all in all, as Bobby Fischer used to say, best by test. Okay? And Napoleon, being a cavalry officer and general of the army, started with knight f6. Now this opening immediately attacks the unguarded e4 pawn, right? And this opening was made famous by Dr. Alekhine in the 1920s when he sprung it on the world, and it's since then become known as the Alekhine defense, or Ayekhin, which is the Russian pronunciation. Immediately attacks the unguarded pawn, so white has to make a decision. Protect the pawn, advance the pawn and attack the knight. The thing is that if you do attack the knight, you're not developing a piece. And in chess, those that get the army out quicker onto the battlefield usually have the upper hand. So Remusat decided that he would just guard the pawn with a pawn. And we have a very pretty pawn chain here. The problem with this move, of course, it does guard the pawn from the knight, is that it blocks in this light squared bishop. It no longer has the freedom to be developed along this light square diagonal. So let's see how Napoleon handled that. He developed his second knight. And as you can see, being a cavalry officer, immediately the first 2 moves of the game for black were knights out onto the board, right? Remusat decided that he would push f4. Now normally, this f-pawn probably should not be pushed until after the king has been castled. It's not usually safe because this dark squared diagonal can give the king a check sometime because there's no longer protection here at f2. But I guess Remusat felt that this knight would have to get out of the way, the pawn would have to be pushed, and then the queen could come up, give a check. So he at least had 3 moves of safety before he would be checked. Napoleon immediately attacked in the center with e5. So he's now attacking this pawn. Of course, Remusat could come back and just recapture with the bishop. So if you're white and you want to get your pieces out as fast as possible, you probably should have played knight f3, guarding this square from the queen so the queen can't give the king a check. But instead, Remusat took the pawn. Now I'm not so sure that that was a good idea, because normally in chess, the better idea is to let your opponent initiate the trade. In chess, if the trade's going to be equal, pawn for pawn, why should white waste the move starting the trade when he could have got a free move and maybe developed the bishop here, developed the bishop here, the knight here, even this knight out? He would have had a free move, because then if the pawn would have taken the pawn, he could have just recaptured with the bishop. So you sort of get like a free move if you let your opponent initiate the trade. Why should you start it and waste the move? In any event, Remusat took the pawn, and Napoleon immediately took back with the knight. Now you have double knights in the center here controlling all these center squares, and these knights are getting very close to this king already. Okay? So, after knight takes pawn, Remusat developed a piece, knight to c3. I'm not so sure knight f3 wouldn't have been the better move to get rid of one of these attackers coming in. The queen could have come up here, right? However, he developed the queenside knight first. And Napoleon, instead of developing another piece, queen or bishop, or even pushing a pawn and getting the light-squared bishop developed, moved his knight a second time. Now, normally in chess circles, you do not move the same piece twice in the opening. You get your minor pieces out, and then you're allowed, or at least the principle allows you, to move a piece the second time, because you're wasting tempos. You need your army out on the battlefield, and this piece is already on the battlefield. Why move it again? Why not get another helper out onto the battlefield? I would have liked this bishop here to pin the knight to the king. I think that might have made more sense. But Napoleon's coming in for the kill right away. So Remusat says, I would love to take this knight with my queen, but obviously you're guarding it with this knight, so I'm going to attack the guard of this knight, and I'm going to remove the guard. Removing the guard is one of the tenets in chess, one of the great principles. So this guard is gone, and the queen will be free to take this knight. Okay? However, Napoleon says, you can't take my knight when your king is in check. And remember at the beginning of the game, I told you about this diagonal here. By pushing this pawn, this opened up the diagonal, and sure enough, here's the queen saying check to the king, right? Well, Remusat said, hey, now I'm attacking two of your pieces. I'm attacking your queen, and I'm attacking your knight. If you move your queen away, which you probably should, I'm going to take this knight with a pawn, and I will be up a piece. So Napoleon says, you're right, but I'll just slide my queen back here and come down, and I'm going to say checkmate right here. Go ahead, take my free knight, and let my queen come down here and say checkmate, guarded by this knight. The king would be trapped. So Remusat, being a decent chess player, certainly saw that he was going to be checkmated here. So he developed this knight over here to cover the checkmate square. And so this knight is developed. The problem with developing knights on the H file or this knight on the A file is how many squares are over here for the knight to go to, guys? The board ends on the H file. So all of these squares don't exist, and this is half of a knight. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares instead of 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's a two-legged knight, okay? So at least he has stopped the checkmate square, all right? Knight comes in and says what to the king? Check. The queen would love to take the knight and stop the check. Unfortunately for Remusat, it's guarded by the queen. So if he does, he'd be giving up a queen for a knight, which would be 10 points for 3, and eventually he'd be losing the game. So he had no choice but to move the king out of the check. And when you move your king, you lose the castling privilege. You can no longer hide your king in the corner and get it safe by the castling maneuver. So Remusat saw Napoleon take this pawn at d4 and say, check again. Now the queen would love to come up and capture the knight again, but again the queen is protecting it. So the king will have to move. Normally there are 3 ways to stop a check. Capture the piece that's giving the check, which in this case would not be very wise because you'd lose a queen. The second is to block it. Well, the beauty of a knight check is there's no way to block a knight check. And of course, the third way is to move the king, which now Remusat has to do. So he has to move his king again. So the king moves out to d3. And his king is now doing a march.
One of the key moments of the match was when Napoleon used his knight for the third time to break open the defenses of Remusat.
This knight comes back and says, check to the king. Well, let's see. If he goes back down, he could be safe there, but maybe there'll be a check here, or maybe a check here again. So the king decided that he would just take the knight. Napoleon develops another piece and says, check to the king. When you're in check, the game is freezing, just like on your remote control on the television. When you press the pause button, the game pauses. You must take care of this check. So 3 ways to stop a check. Well, there's no blocking square, so you can forget blocking. The king could take the bishop, and he could run away and hide, but again, the king decided that he would take the bishop and get rid of Napoleon's pieces. But take a look at the board. All of White's army is behind the king. When your king is your most advanced piece in chess, you are definitely in trouble. So, queen shoots over and gives the king a check. The king obviously cannot take the queen because it's protected by the 2 pawns. So, there's only one square I believe the king can go to, which is here. Well, he could have gone, oh, it couldn't have gone here because of the knight. So that was the only square he could have gone to. And now Napoleon says to his minister, Shachmat, the king is dead. And Napoleon checkmated Remusat's king in the center of the board. Now that was a beautiful, beautiful game showing how the knights can maneuver all over the board very quickly. They're very tricky. They're very mystical pieces in chess. And Napoleon was in his prime in 1802 as Emperor of the World, and he was holding court in Paris when this game was played. But there should be a caveat, understanding that perhaps being a minister to Napoleon, that you might not have wanted to embarrass him in front of his court. So perhaps Remusat made a few errors in judgment, whether he did so on purpose or just because he was negligent. Might have been the safer way to go. But this is a beautiful game showing how knights can maneuver early in the game. Okay. And that is the Napoleon game for now. We do have one more Napoleon game, which was played 20 years later, and we'll cover that at a later session. Thank you.
What I want you to take away from today's lesson is, if you don't castle early, you will get checkmated in the center of the board. This is Mitch Jason for the LA Chess Club signing off from Santa Monica, California. See you next time.